Hello and welcome to my August reading wrap up. That's right, I figured out how to read again. Did I actually just figure out how to read again? Was it because of Cujo, or is it because I decided to do the MS Readathon and pressure myself into reading again? I don't know. We don't have these answers. I think Cujo did it. I think it was Cujo, because the feeling of not having completed something for a while puts extra pressure on actually completing it. But I completed it, and then I was like, you know what, I can do this. Let's read some more. So, here we go. Night Shift, which I did technically start over a year ago. I finally finished it. Yes. This was 3 out of 5 stars. I started reading this in January 2023, and I finally finished it. It's a collection of short stories, so I would read one at a time and then have to take a break so it could settle. This is largely why it got put on hold for over a year. I really struggle with reading short story collections because by the time it builds up enough for you to get invested, it's almost over, and then you have to move on. And I can't just jump from one story to the next if they're unrelated. I need a processing break. Some of the stories in this book were definitely better than others. A few of them were incredibly creepy, some were a different kind of good, and a couple just didn't land. Also, maybe don't read a horror story about rats while sitting in the dark at 10 o'clock at night in a house that has rats. It's me. Hi. I'm the problem, it's me. The Magic Faraway Tree. 4 out of 5 stars. When people say this one got rewritten because of the violence, I thought they were stretching for a complaint, but wow, this one was actually quite violent. Definitely not in a way that calls to being rewritten, though. It's really quite minor stuff and was standard for a children's book, but it did throw me to see these usually wholesome characters getting into fights and hitting people. Regardless, it's still a fun and cute read, and I wouldn't change a single thing about it. The Fog. Backstory for this one, it was on my dad's bookshelf throughout my entire childhood, and every time I saw it, I was like, I want to read that. I am really, really interested. I was so intrigued by this book. I've been wanting to read it most of my life. And when he was getting rid of his books to move, I said yoink to a few of them, and this was one of them, obviously, and I finally read it. And it was terrible. But I also realized about halfway through that it's the first book in a trilogy, so of course I had to order the other two, and now I'm reading those. So anyway, The Fog. It's 2 out of 5 stars. This book has nothing to do with fog, which would be fine if it didn't advertise itself as being about dangerous fog. No one told her the fog could kill. Okay, sure, but that's got nothing to do with what actually happens in this book. Fog is mentioned maybe 3 times in the entire book, and not as a current thing, but as a reference or a memory. If you want to write a book about evil, deadly killer fog, go for it, but this doesn't fit that at all. If you want to write a book that has nothing to do with fog, maybe don't call it The Fog and give it a tagline about killer fog. On top of the book having absolutely nothing to do with what it claims to be about, it's just not particularly good. It's a little boring, there are things that don't make any real sense, and there is a constant misuse of a very common word that seems to have a somewhat fluid meaning. It feels like the author was just attempting to invent slang, which could have worked if it had been consistent in the way it was used, but it wasn't, and it ended up just not making sense. The First to Die at the End. I wanted a book that was going to make me cry, and considering what happened in the first one, I thought this would be it. But apparently not. The First to Die in the End. The First to Die at the End. 3 out of 5 stars. The first roughly 200 pages of this was going great, but then it dropped off, and I realized I was bored. I wasn't enjoying it anymore. There are so many different groups to follow, and they're all being drawn out in very fine detail at a point where it's moving so slowly that it feels like nothing is happening. It definitely has good points, and it does pick up again for a few moments here and there, but overall, it's very drawn out and slow, and that kind of ruined it for me a bit. Moxie. I read this for my book club, it was my friend's pick, and this is what we settled on. So, 4 out of 5 stars. This was a fun book about teenage feminism, girls being girls, and standing up for what you believe in. It holds some important messages about fighting for your rights and not sitting down and shutting up just because it's accepted. What the stars didn't show us. 2 out of 5 stars. Having previously read another book by this author, Tears in the Water, I expected better. Instead, I found this difficult, painful to read, and was incredibly relieved when it was over. So there we are, that is what we read in August. And I'm finally over my inability to read and process words, so watch out, because September's gonna be fun.